Okay, we have our 30-second warning. 30-second warning to find your assigned pew and get comfortable. Okay, 10-second countdown. Are you about to have the rocket is going to lift off in just a second? Oh. Is there anything I can... Oh, yes, there is. There's a vent right here, and it's blowing out extremely cold air. Not anymore. If that thing starts levitating, you know why. It will go to the children's home. I'm just borrowing it over there for just a second. Okay, a couple things I want to make you aware of. I had an opportunity to visit with some folks between service and class. One of the sweet ladies that has been visiting with us, she sits over by us. Her name is Jessica Lance. She works at Broadmoor as a teacher. In fact, her mom, who is from Washington State or lives in Washington State, has been visiting with her. And so she's been with us for the last few weeks and will be for the next few. Anyway, Jessica mentioned that her cousin, Matt Larson, who lives in Iowa, he's a Lutheran pastor, and she thinks that he works with several congregations, and she believes that he was traveling between two or coming home from one and was involved in a vehicle accident. And he was severely injured and has had lots of surgeries. And so if you'll remember Matt Larson in your prayers. He also has a son who's about to graduate from high school as well, and had another son who was hospitalized because of an accident not too long ago, and so we want to pray for the Larson family. Also, Julie Hillard is not with us today. She's had some really bad hip pain and has been to the hospital and released and is going to go back to a doctor, so we want to pray for her. Also, Rocky May just had cataract surgery, and he's recuperating from that. And they had to leave to go take care of Julie, but hopefully he's going to be online to hear me say that, Rocky, once your eyes get better, you may not like what you see in the mirror. So that's just so you know. And then also, one more thing I want to say along this lines. After I had those prayer requests, I was visiting with the Van Winkles, and Eddie came up to me and he said, I want to thank you guys for the Bible reading program that we set out at the first of the year. We encouraged people to read, and he and Louise are finished. And they didn't come up here to tell me this, so I'd share it with you, but I just want to brag on them. They actually started the Bible reading program at the 1st of February. And were able to complete. What have you done to that poor child? Just bring him to me. I'll take care of him. So they just finished the Bible reading program, which means that, in about 15 weeks, they were able to read through the entire Bible. So for those of you who said, I would love to read through the Bible, but, I've got to wait till next January, they were able to do it in 3.5 months, and so I want to lay that challenge out. If you haven't started already, you can catch up. And really, what was exceptional to me is Eddie said, you know what, I'm in good health, but I just don't know how much longer I'm going to be here, and I really wanted to read through the Bible, and so I'm really proud that he was able to do that. I also want to reiterate what Scotty said earlier about my appreciation to each of you. I get to go to ministers' meetings once a month, and so I get to visit with them about is my mic going out? I keep hearing my mic going out. Is somebody up in the booth? I don't see anybody up there. If they are, they're sleeping. Wake up. So if you don't mind, will you turn this one on, and then I'll shut this one off. The only thing worse than having to listen to me is having to listen to half of what I say. Trust me, my wife would know all about that. Speaking of, so I wanted to thank you. I have an opportunity to go to minister meetings, and also have some different ministers that I get to Skype with. And I've heard some pretty tough stories. Thank you. Some pretty tough stories that they've had to share about some leadership issues, or maybe even some member issues where people are griping and complaining and arguing and fighting, and they're drawing lines in the sand and about, where they have to sit, or wearing masks, or social distancing. And I know we all don't agree with each other on this, but I'm just so thankful that, at least from my perspective, no one has been hounding me or barking about we need to do this or that or this. You have been overly patient with us as we've spread out pews and tried to do different things, and I really appreciate that. It means so much to me that I feel like I'm not getting up here and worried about like mask or no mask. If you're wearing it, God bless you. If you're not, God bless you. We're thankful that you're here or you're with us online. I cannot thank you enough. So one more thing I have to say, and then we'll get started with class. I made a mistake, and my wife pointed it out, and so I'm making full disclosure here. Wednesday night, when I woke up and I thought we were about to explode and I was fearing for my wife's life, I may have helped her out of the bed. Her words were pushed her out of the bed. And she's not here to defend herself. We lost electricity early this morning, so she had to run home and make sure that all the curling irons and stuff got turned off, so that they don't turn on, because our electricity got turned back on. So she can't defend herself, but I'm here to say that I may have encouraged her, motivate her to get out of bed when I thought we were about to explode. And we didn't, so all was good. I don't remember that. That's the beautiful thing about this. And I do this every so few months, and probably every 2 or 3 months. And every time I do it, I'm half awake, I'm half asleep, but I'm still convinced that whatever's about to happen is really happening. And I always say, no, honey, this time it's real. And the best part about this one is, so I have Thursday off, so I do have to, get up and get the kids there. But she's always up at 5:15 in the morning, so this happens at 2-3 in the morning. So she gets up and tries to reorient herself and goes to the restroom. She comes back, and I'm asleep, and I am snoring, breathing heavily, and she cannot go back to sleep because I just yelled at her and pushed her out of bed. And now I'm snoring, and she has to wake up in a few hours. So the things that my beautiful wife has to put up with, but all I can say is she said yes. She said yes. She didn't know what she was getting into, but that's what it is. Okay, so I want to do this a little differently. So I woke up, this true story, I woke up in the middle of the night on last night and said, okay, forget what we're doing. We're not going to do Exodus 21 through 24 like I had planned to do. We were going to get through 3 chapters. So I'm going to have to rethink that one. But I said, you know what? This is going to be all about Jesus. And I said, well, what are we going to do on class? And I thought, okay, I want to do this. What I want to do is I want to go through stories that kind of just talk about who Jesus is. Like, what are some things that he did? And I'm like, you all know my favorite stories. Like I can't stop talking. I even referenced it last week. One of my favorite stories is the bleeding woman. I love that story. I love what it tells, but you've heard me tell that story and how I feel like that story really resonates with me. I feel like I'm the person in the crowd who is like unnoticed. Like, it's just Doug. He's the goof up. He's the weird kid. He's, whatever. Right? And so I really, that's the story that I connect with. And so I thought, well, what if I just ask people to say, what's their story? Like, what story do you read about Jesus that you say, you know what, that's the story that really touches my life? So I went ahead and I have some backups in case you freeze or you just don't want to talk. But otherwise, I hope I don't have to share those, because if I share them, they're ones that you've clearly already heard before. So I want to give you an opportunity to share, what are some stories, what are some, whether it's a miracle or it's a parable or a teaching or something that Jesus did that when that happened, you thought, that really meant something to me. So I'm just going to open it up. Okay, tell me about the widow from Nain. Yes. So we have the story of the widow from Nain, and Paula pointed that out. And this is a really interesting story because there is no prior conversation that we know of. Okay, and there are different times, we looked at, even last week when we were looking at Matthew, there was the time that the faith of the centurion, it was like almost the exact opposite of the widow of Nain. Okay, so this centurion, he comes and he says, my servant is sick, can you heal them? And Jesus is like, yeah, we'll go there. And the centurion says, no, like, listen, I'm a man of authority. I tell people to do something and they do it. Like, I believe you to be a man of authority. You don't have to go. Like, I'm not worthy for you to come. You can just heal my servant and that'll be good. You don't even have to come. And Jesus did that. And then Jesus went on to say, wow, I have not seen anyone with such great faith. And you think, that is a story of Jesus is calling people to have faith and believe. And then we have the story of the widow of Nain. Here's what we know about her. She's a widow, okay, and our only son has died. And she's left with no one. And here's what we know. No, there is no pleading for Jesus. She doesn't call out to Jesus. We don't know that she's even heard of Jesus. She's going down the road. She is weeping. Jesus sees her and he goes up there and he stops the procession and he heals the boy. I say heals the boy. He raises her son from the dead right then. So is there anything in particular why that story really speaks to you or why you like it?
Well, it shows his compassion.
Yeah. Like even if she wasn't fully aware maybe of who he was, she wasn't even crying out to him, like he saw her and had compassion on her. And so I love that story too. If you share a story about Jesus, I'm not going to say, "Oh, I really don't like that one." So I'm not going to show favoritism because I love all of his stories, but that's a great one. What's another story, Lee?
Peter walking on water.
Okay, so tell me why the story of Peter walking on water, why that means something to you.
It just shows it's a good reminder to us. God, God's going to take care of us. He's going to be with us. Whenever Peter took his eyes off Jesus, that's whenever he started sinking.
Yeah.
When we keep our eyes on Jesus, we keep focused on him, keep our faith in him, he's going to get us through. He's going to get us to where we need to be.
Yeah. It's a fantastic story, and it is a story of staying focused on Jesus. And the whole story started when Jesus did what with his apostles? What did he say? He says, you guys go, and I'm going to stay back here and pray. Okay. And that was even prior to that, is when he had fed the 5,000 or the multitudes. And prior to that, he had just found out that his cousin had been beheaded, the one who had gone on before him, John the Baptist. And he wanted to be alone, and he couldn't because he saw the people and he had compassion on them. He's like, they're like sheep without a shepherd. And so he ends up, instead of spending that time in prayer, he just completely drained himself with that, being with the people. Then he sent them off, and then he stayed and prayed, and then he's walking out on water. This is a story that I love. I don't know if Jesus was trying to be sneaky or funny, but I just love the fact that in one of the accounts, he's walking towards them, and they're straining at the oars. Okay? And he realizes he can walk faster than they can row. And so he decides, I'm just going to keep on going. I just love that story. He's like, I don't need to sit there in the boat. I'm just going to keep on walking. He's walking. They see him. They think it's a ghost. They cry out. And Peter, using the absolute worst logic ever. Think about this. This is the worst logic ever. He calls out to a guy who people say is a ghost and says, if you're Jesus, let me walk on water. If that's a ghost and he has evil intentions, he's going to say, yep, come on out here, buddy. And bloop, he's going to go right in. But Peter calls out, he walks out to him, and then as you pointed out, it's when he stops looking at Jesus. Okay, and we talked about this several weeks ago when we were looking at the Apostle Peter. We did several weeks on him. But one of the things I thought that was interesting is that when he took his eyes off Jesus, maybe, and he started to sink, maybe it wasn't that he didn't have faith in Jesus. He didn't have faith that Jesus would save him, because he started looking at the waves and he lost, because Jesus locked eyes with him and says, you can do this, right? And as soon as he looks away, that's when he says, I can't do this. And he started putting the I in. Instead of Jesus is helping me walk, he sees the waves and says, I can't do this. And Jesus pulls them back in and says, why'd you doubt? And they go back in the boat. He didn't let him sink. So I love that story. And I saw, Kenneth, did you have your hand up?
I did. I want to say about Peter denying, but it's really a lot of just Peter stories, because he loves Christ, but he messes up so much. And, Jesus always is like, I'm here for you, man.
Yeah.
It's the denial and him taking him back. It's the, I'm not going to let you do this, and Jesus has to straighten him out and tell him, hey, look, this is God, this is God's will. You can't tell me I can't do that. It's just Peter in general.
Yeah.
I think I relate a lot.
Yeah. Are there other people who relate to Peter who kind of feel that way? I feel a lot like Peter, the blundering and the bumbling. I feel a lot like him. And one of my favorite stories is the women are at the tomb. They show up there and they realize, I hope I'm not confusing my stories, that Jesus has risen. And I need to find what account it is, but I'm pretty sure it's when Jesus is now resurrected. And he says, go tell the disciples and Peter that I have risen. Like he went out of his way to say, Peter, it didn't end when you ran away. It didn't end at the cross. I'm still here. And the fact that he was still concerned about Peter who ran away and Peter who denied, that he says, hang in there, Peter, don't give up. And I love that, because Kenneth, I can relate to that too. So that's one of my favorites. Bob?
I like the account when Jesus washed the apostles' feet. The reason being that sometimes service is not deep and use service, sometimes it's messy.
Okay. When you say service, you're talking about like the fact that like he did something that like nobody else wanted to do. Okay.
There's times we need to do things that maybe a lot of people don't want to do.
How unglamorous is that? And that's from John's gospel when he writes about that in chapter 13. They're there sitting around the table. There's already been this argument about who's better, like who's the greatest. And part of this would have probably been who gets to sit at the seat of honor, right? And then some of this would have been about who should get up and wash disciples' feet, who should be doing this. And then Jesus just baffles them all when he stands up and he starts washing their feet. And of course, that's when Peter says, "You can't wash my feet." And Jesus says, "Well, you know what? If I don't wash your feet, you can have no part of me." And he says, "Well, wash the rest of me too." That's always Peter. Just, you got to love him. He is full bore. I mean, he lives life like my wife drives. I mean, the pedal, the foot is all on the accelerator or all on the brake. She's not here yet, is she? She hadn't made it back, so I'm okay to say that. Oh, this is being recorded. I love you. But that's the way Peter lived life. But I love how Jesus, he did something that was like so, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it was, I mean, humiliating is kind of it. It was just, he was debasing himself by doing that. And he says, "Listen, if I'm going to do this, then you should do this as well." Like, that's what he taught those guys before he left. I want you to be foot washers. So I think it's really powerful. Delane?
One of my favorite stories is after the resurrection, when
Okay.
Jesus meets the believers on the road to Emmaus, and they don't know him.
Yes.
And they talk. They even go in to call it a night and break bread, and then they recognize him. And it just reminds me of how obtuse we are sometimes, just dumb, and we don't see things at all.
Yeah, they're on their way back, and Jesus joins them, and he's like disguised, and he says, "What are you guys talking about?" And they kind of criticize, make fun of him a little bit. They're like, "Who are you? Are you the only one who doesn't know what's going on?" And so they start telling him about him. There's this guy named Jesus. Oh, really? Jesus? Where's he from? Yeah, Nazareth. I can almost imagine saying like, "Wow, really, Nazareth? What good comes out of Nazareth," right? And they tell this story, and then he starts to explain. And then I love this part of the story because they get to the house. They've made the trek there, and he literally acts like he's going to keep going. And they say, no, you come in. And then they sit down, and it's when they break bread together as they realize he disappears, and they're like, "That was Jesus right here, and how could we have missed it?" He was right there, and sometimes we miss it. One of my favorite things is just when God gives us glimpses of his presence. And if we're just careful enough, we can catch those and be like, "Wow, that's a God thing." I love seeing how God works in just really fantastic, almost mundane ways that we see he is here and he's present. And the road to Emmaus in Luke is a fantastic one, and that's one of my favorites for sure. So, Louise?
One of mine, I think right now is to do with Donald Thomas after the resurrection, because he's the one that said he wouldn't believe it unless he saw the real strong hands on his side where he was perfectly still.
Yes.
And Jesus said, after Donald Thomas got to put his hands in front of him, he said, "You speaks to me, let me know, because I believe that I'll see him tomorrow.
Yeah. Thomas is there, or he wasn't there. And later on he shows up and they say, we saw Jesus. And he says, I'm not going to believe unless, I see him and I, put my hands there. And I love how when that happens, when Jesus shows up and he says, look, I want you to look and see. I mean, put your hands there. And he does it and he blurts out, my Lord and my God. And I don't think that wasn't prepared. That wasn't like some kind of profession of faith like that was rote. It was just like he couldn't help but do it. And I don't want to say anything else because some of you may know we are going through the apostles on Wednesday night. This Wednesday night there's going to be a baccalaureate. My wife made fun of me because I can't pronounce baccalaureate. I think I pronounce it baccalaureate, and it's baccalaureate. So whatever it is, I'm going to be there. And so Scotty and Lance are filling in for me. And kind of on the docket is Thomas. And so I mentioned to Scotty, I was like, hey, are you doing Thomas? And he's like, I'm not telling you what I'm going to do. You're just going to have to watch later on or find out. And so I'm anxious. So if I don't want to say any more about Thomas because that may come up in a few days and it may not. But great story of Thomas. Okay, Eddie?
I think my favorite story is the adulterous woman. They caught her in the act and they dragged her out to Jesus, expecting him to condemn her. And he kind of ignored them a minute and kept writing in the dirt. But then he told them, he who is without sin cast the first stone. And that, to me, that's something that we could use every day. We start finding people to condemn for something or them us. You better look at your own life before you start to, condemn someone else for their sins. And I'm thankful that Jesus forgives us.
Sure. And I suppose there are many of us who felt like we've been in that situation before, that we've been caught red-handed, and whether it's the scarlet letter that we wear on for everyone to see, and we're just have that shame. Here we have this woman, she's been drug out, she's caught in the act, and so she's probably, she's not prepared for this moment. Just think, if you ever thought, I have an opportunity to see Jesus, like this Son of God, this miracle worker, like he calls us to a higher way of living, and he offers us eternity in that. And the moment that you get to meet him is when you are covered in filth and sin and nothing else, and probably drug out before him undressed. And people along the way have just ridiculed her. We don't know if she was trapped into this. We just know that she was caught in the act, but the guy's nowhere to be seen. And so we don't know if he was a part of this deal, that she was set up or what, but he's nowhere around, except she knows she's at the feet of a guy who's about to determine her fate. And the law says, the people around are saying, it's get ready for a stoning. I was at the mall yesterday, a real mall, not the one here in Hobbs, because that's not a mall. And we happened to be crossing, and we saw kind of some yelling. And so, being the person that I am, I walk right to it. Like, there's some people yelling, something's wrong. Like, for some reason, I need to do something about this. So I go to walk in there, and there's a young teenager, either a teenager, and 5 others, and it's basically 1 against 5, and they're screaming and yelling at each other. And it gets worse and worse and worse, and the crowd gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm thinking, at some point the fight's going to break out, and it's going to get ugly. And And I'm concerned for the people who are going to get trampled. I'm also concerned that there's a kid who's 1 on 5, whether he's right or wrong. Kids are terrible, terrible, terrible these days. That sounds awful. I don't mean that. But when I was a kid, we fought. And one person would fight one person. And then when the one person fell down, like they would yell at them and say something about them and talk about their, family lineage, their mom or their dad or something, and they'd walk away. And now that doesn't happen. If a kid gets on the ground, everybody thinks, look, his head looks like a soccer ball. Let's go kick him in the face. I don't know why this happens. And that really bothers me. So I thought, if this kid ends up on the ground, like somebody's got to keep him from dying or. And so we're kind of closing. It's getting loud, and it's getting bigger and bigger and louder and yelling and screaming. And finally, the police officers or mall security shows up, and they start to break away. But in that time, you could just literally feel the tension in that mall court just rise and get just more and more as they're yelling and screaming at each other. And I just think, what did this woman feel like? It wasn't 1 on 5. It was like 1 on several hundred. And they're yelling and they're screaming and they're literally debating while she's on the ground if she should die or not. And you can just feel the tension rise. And Jesus doesn't say anything. He bends down and he starts writing. And that scholars have devoted thousands of pages and millions of hours trying to figure out, I wonder what Jesus was really writing. We don't know for sure. But then he would say, you know what? Where are those who condemn you? Where are the ones who are about to throw the stone? And she's like, they're not here. And he's like, I'm not going to condemn you. I'm not going to take your life either. Instead, he was going to offer her a new life. Now, leave that life of sin. And I think so many people need to hear that story, because somewhere they got convinced that once they made that terrible mistake, that they would never be forgiven. And I think as the body of Christ, we should be the one fighting for the sinners and the adulterers and the drug addicts. We should be pleading not to take their life, but to offer them a new life. And that's hard to do. Okay, great. Okay, Miss Carolyn.
The one in Matthew about the little children and Jesus.
Let the little children come to me and don't hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And I love that too. And of course you would love that, because you have just devoted so much of your life to being with little children and bringing them to you. And it's the one glimpse that I get that perhaps Jesus is not as stodgy as what we think he is. Because we just don't get a whole lot of Jesus laughing or joking but there's just something about kids love to be around people who smile and who bring joy in their life. And I just get the sense that right there is giving us a glimpse of Jesus, who loved life. And even though he seemingly got into a lot of arguments with people who wanted to go after him because of, whether he ceremonially washed his hands or when he ate on the Sabbath, he was willing to step up to the people who were oppressors, but then he also would just love those kids. And I just think he had to be smiling when those kids got around him. And that's a part of Jesus that we don't read a whole lot about. So I'm glad you shared that one. Okay, who else? Larry and then Doug.
Jesus and the fig tree.
Okay. Oh, wow, this is a tough one. Okay, so this is a tough one. Tell me how the story of the fig tree touches you.
Well, he goes by once, sees the tree, comes by again, and condemns the tree and wilts it right in front of everyone because it wasn't fruitful. then goes on to tell us that they ask him how he does it, and he says, if you have faith, you can move mountains.
Yeah. Yeah, Jesus, it's a really fantastic story, and he sees the tree, and there's even some question as to whether it's the season for the figs, right? And so he comes by again, and it hasn't bared. Is that the right word? Born. Thank you. Hasn't borne any fruit. And then he's going to cause it to shrivel. Okay, so fig trees can grow to be pretty big. I mean, if you're thinking of like a tree that would grow in New Mexico, those are called bushes. Okay, this would have been big, and so this would have been pretty amazing to watch how this happened. And so he curses it, and then it's really an opportunity. One, we're called to be people who are fruitful, but then it's also to say, hey, but I'm the one who supplies you with that power, right? That it's not just about, you have to work to get that fruit, that he has given you the ability. And if you have faith, you can do all these things. And so a really kind of shrouded in mystery, but it's a really interesting story about how he comes by and does that. Okay, Doug?
Well, I don't know if I have a particular story that I love the most. I love all the stories that have been shared. But your message earlier this morning really made me go back and reflect about all the worries in the world. And, we all worry about our children, we worry about parents, we worry about illnesses, finances, jobs. But in John 14, when Jesus is talking about the coming of the Holy Spirit, and toward the end, in verse 27, where he talks about, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. And I think that in today's times, that full trust in God, that it's his will, and if we trust in him, it will go according to his plan.
Yeah. And
I struggle with that at times.
Oh, and I think we all do, right? I mean, it's just, can you imagine how this world would change and how our lives would change if we had a greater trust? And I think everybody here, I'm not trying to condemn anyone, but I think everybody in here would say, man, I would love for my faith in God to increase. Now, I'm not saying like you have to have, we're talking about levels of faith to get in. This is an issue of salvation, but the more we're able to trust in God, it was only because of full 100% total trust in God that Jesus could say the night before, it'll be the night before he dies, but right as this is happening, he's saying, okay, if there's any way we can avoid this, like, I'm all for it, but I'm just going to trust in you. And if he didn't trust in God, if Jesus didn't trust in God, he can get out of that garden and it would be totally different. But he remained faithful to God. And how many times in my life, if I just trusted in God, would the outcome have been different? And so trust in God, trust also in me. In my house, there are many rooms. If it weren't true, I wouldn't have told you about it. And I love that. He's just saying, believe me when I say this. And you mentioned that, as a parent, we have lots of, and I'm a little nervous because I'm starting to get a glimpse that once my kids are out of high school, that it doesn't end. Like I always have had this idea that like the heartache and fear that I have for my kids. Okay, Michelle back there, you're smiling real big, and that makes me super nervous. But like I've always thought, if I can just make it to 18, I'll have done it, and then I don't have to worry anymore. And then I hear people saying like, well, my child just turned 40 and I still worry about him every day. And I'm like, what is this? But just, trusting in God. And as that's one thing that has helped me as a parent to see that, like, I've tried to tell my kids, okay, trust me, it's okay. Just trust me, it's going to be okay. And they're like, I don't trust you. And then I get so, I'm like, just trust me on this one. And then my prayers to God are, I don't trust you on this one, and he's like, just trust me. I don't know. It's Hobbs. Is there really anything good that can come out of Hobbs? Why would you send us there? That is a prayer that was uttered. God, really? Do you really want us to go to Hobbs? Like, you have to give us a sign. Like, it has to be really? Are you sure? Okay, just one more sign. We get, oh man. And so we end up here and just, we could not be more blessed. We just can't be more blessed by being here. Like, just the most fantastic group of people that we love so much. And just so thankful for them that you've allowed us to struggle through this. We are just about out of time. We have time for one more, it looks like. I have 1:09 on my watch. Wait. Yeah, we have time for one more. Who wants to close this out? You? Okay.
I love the story where Jesus, where Christ his friend, because he missed him.
Yes.
He loved him and that
Yes. It was when he healed Lazarus in John 11. He comes to him and he sees Mary and he sees Martha and he's reassuring them and he's like, it's going to be okay. And he says, if you just trust me on this one. And, he's like, I am the resurrection. Oh, I know someday we're going to. He says, no, I am. And he says, Lazarus, come out. And just another really great story. Well, those are set on a timer. So we know what that means. I'm going to say a very quick prayer because I don't know what's going to happen next after that. So I want to close this out in prayer. We'll be dismissed. God, thank you so much for just giving us an opportunity to tell stories about your son. And when we tell stories about him, we really are telling stories about you. God, we're broken and you heal us. We're lost and you have found us. We are stuck in sin and you sacrificed and you have delivered us. And so, Lord, that's not only for all of us, but it's also for this whole world that is groaning and aching and we're living in fear and anguish. And God, please just let us tell your story to this world. Let them be able to hear and know that we don't have to have that fear and that anxiety and the hatred that's been consuming us. God, thank you for your stories of Jesus. May we continue to share them in the way that we live, in the way that we act, in the way that we love others. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen. Thank you all for being here. You're dismissed.